إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Earlier we finished our talk about the imprisonment and life in prison about Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, a man who had no wife, no children, no house, no wealth, and no position. A man who rented a room next to the Umayyah Masjid in Syria today. He had a little room there. But most of the time he would sleep in the masjid. He used to survive on a good day, his meal would be a loaf of bread. He used to have 2 thobs. 1 thob he ended up giving it to a beggar, so he remained with 1 thob for the rest of his life. But in the darkness of his hardship, in the darkness of his torment in prison, he said heaven was in his breast. He said killing him was making him a martyr. He said prison was a seclusion to worship Allah. He said ousting him, kicking him out of the land, was tourism for him. He goes in prison 7 times, 5 years total, and he dies in prison. Ibn Taymiyyah, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, a man who in Manaqib Ibn Taymiyyah, Abu Hafs al-Bazzar narrates that he says, I have not seen anyone glorify Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah like his own brother. He used to travel with him. He used to handle his worldly affairs. And you remember one of the stories we mentioned about him in prison, his brother was with him in prison. And his brother used to sit in his presence like there was a bird on his head and listen to him and respect him. It's as though it was fear. It was respect, but they seen it as almost it was fear. The other students would be amazed and say, it's the custom and norm that a man's family are at ease and they're not as reserved as outsiders. They would open up, a relative opens up to his relative, especially a brother. Yet we see you with your brother Ibn Taymiyyah, your respect exceeds our respect as students. Why you do that? So the brother said, I see of him that which nobody else said, which obligates me to respect him in the matter that you see. He sees worship in ibadah, in taqwa, in fear of Allah, that which obligates him to respect him to that level. Ibn Daqiq al-Eid said, لما اجتمعت بابن تيمية رأيت العلوم كلها بين عينيه يأخذ منها ما يريد ويدع ما يريد. He said, when I met Ibn Taymiyyah, I seen a man with knowledge, vast amount of knowledge before his eyes. He takes what he wants and he leaves what he wants. A true scholar. I heard recently a Shaykh speaking, and he was saying in his talk, he said, when I go to record my shows in the studio, he said the producer was telling me, we had this da'i and this so-called person. When they come to us, they say, maneuver the camera in a way that our notes don't show. Don't show that we're using notes. So, because it's very easy to go on YouTube or take a lecture. Now you just can print a lecture off the internet and maybe even spice it up a little bit and use it. That's not knowledge. That may be good if you want to listen to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, convey one ayah. You want to convey that message, that's good. But don't ever think you're a mufti if you do 3, 4 of those. And don't even consider yourself a pre-student of knowledge if you do that, even if the masses listen to you. Today, a few speeches like that, and the person ends up speaking on matters and destinies of the ummah that the Sahaba would have backed away from. That's not knowledge. Knowledge is like Ibn Taymiyyah, al-ulum bayna aynay. You have to thoroughly study fiqh and tawheed and seerah and the knowledges, the foundational knowledges, in order for you to be a pre-student of knowledge. Yet Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, with all that knowledge that Ibn Daqiq al-Eid says, he's a man who dies in prison. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah's knowledge was so vast that al-Dhahabi said, يصدق عليه أن يقال كل حديث لا يعرفه ابن تيمية فليس بحديث. Every hadith Ibn Taymiyyah doesn't know, this is al-Dhahabi. And if al-Dhahabi says that, you better believe it. Every hadith Ibn Taymiyyah says he doesn't know, is not a hadith. Shows you his knowledge in ilm al-hadith too. Abu al-Baqa al-Subki said, والله يا فلان ما يبغض ابن تيمية إلا جاهل أو صاحب هوى. فالجاهل لا يدري ما يقول وصاحب الهوى يصده هواه عن الحق بعد معرفته به. He said, Wallahi, no one hates Ibn Taymiyyah except one who's ignorant or one who follows his desires. One who's ignorant, doesn't know what he's saying. And one who follows his desire suppresses him from the truth after knowing it. He walks in prison, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, and he's carried out Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah from prison said, if the kings knew the happiness that we feel in our hearts, they would come to us and try to take it with the tip of their swords. When one's heaven is in his breast, there's very little prison or harm like prison can do to him. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, إن في الدنيا جنة من لم يدخلها لم يدخل جنة الآخرة. In this world is a heaven. Who doesn't enter this heaven will not enter the heaven of the life after. What heaven, Ibn Taymiyyah? The heaven of submission to Allah, of worship to Allah, of being subservient to Allah, giving Allah victories when others back away, giving Allah victories when the sellouts back away. That's the pleasure only a righteous person feels. He feels as though he's in a Jannah. He feels as though he's in a Jannah in this life. He says, if you don't enter that Jannah, you won't enter the Jannah of the life after. Ibn Hajar, rahimahullah, said in his book, in his commentating on his book, Ar-Radd al-Wafir, he said, وشهرة ابن تيمية أشهر من الشمس وتلقيب بشيخ الإسلام في عصره باق إلى الآن على الألسنة الزكية ويستمر غدا كما كان بالأمس ولا ينكر ذلك إلا من جهل مقداره أو تجنب الإنصاف. Ibn Hajar rahimahullah says, Ibn Taymiyyah's popularity is more popular than the sun. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah's name remains Shaykh al-Islam today as fresh as it remained Shaykh al-Islam during his time. And it will continue to remain on Shaykh al-Islam. Today we say that hundreds of years later. It's true what Ibn Hajar said. And no one will or can deny that except one who's ignorant of his status or has no justice. This was a man who was in prison. Al-Hafidh al-Shahir, Alam al-Din al-Barazali, in his book on history, he said, لم يوجد في الإسلام من اجتمع في جنازته كما اجتمع في جنازة ابن تيمية. No one gathered in a funeral like those who gathered in the funeral of Ibn Taymiyyah. Except, of course, Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And he said the reason is because Ahmad ibn Hanbal was in Baghdad. And in Baghdad, there was more masses, more population over there. Who does not know Ibn Taymiyyah? Who doesn't know Ibn Taymiyyah? He safeguarded Islam. So Allah safeguarded his name and mention. And his knowledge continues today. How many times a day the students of knowledge and masses of the Ummah say, Rahimahullah. Other scholars who were more popular during his time, they were more well known during his time. They're the ones who dominated the scene during this time. Some may not be bad, but gave in a little bit to rulers. Some who just merely took positions. Some who just merely refused to take stands. They are rarely ever mentioned in the names. Ibn Taymiyyah is fresh on the tongues, on the masses of the Muslim tongues, as fresh as it was when he was alive, if not even more today. Now let's move on to our next proud graduate of the University of Yousif alayhi salam. And no, we're not talking about their lives. We're not even talking about the trials within their lives. Because the topic of our talk is proud graduates of the University of Yousif, which is prison. So we're only talking about trials they endured or part of it when they went to prison. That's why it's called the proud graduates of the University of Yousif alayhi salam. So we're only talking about that portion. It would be injustice to say we're talking about their life or even the trials within their life. This is the portion of their trials in prison. Imam Abu Hanifa, the Imam, the great Imam, went through many trials. One was with the Khawarij, which was not that big of a trial. Big, but not as big as the other ones. And then with the Umayyah and the Abbasiyya Khilafah. Both the Umayyah and the Abbasiyya. Al-Dhahhak ibn Qais al-Shaybani, who was a Khariji, entered upon him and held Abu Hanifa as a captive. He was from the Khawarij. And he asked Ibn Taymiyyah to repent on matters, he said, discussing Ali and Muawiyah radiallahu anhum. But Abu Hanifa remained steadfast and kept debating him back and forth until they gave up and let him go. Another time they returned and they said, Abu Hanifa, we have two deceased people outside. One was a woman who died and she was a prostitute. The other died on an overdose of alcohol. The Khawarij, among their principle and beliefs, is that the real Khawarij, they believe that one who commits a major sin is a kafir. A Muslim, if he's Muslim and he commits a major sin, he's a kafir. So Ibn Taymiyyah, they wanted Abu Hanifa to denounce or call those two deceased kafir. Abu Hanifa continued to debate them back and forth, because we believe if they pray and they made their salah and they died on a major sin, we don't call them a kafir. He began to debate them until they backed away, and actually most of them left arm and joined Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. During the Umayyad leadership, there was a man called Yazid ibn Amr ibn Hubayra. In the time of the Umayyad, the governor of Iraq. Al-Muwaffaq, in his chain of narration, said Ibn Hubayra had issues governing Iraq. So he gathered the fuqaha. And among the fuqaha he gathered was Ibn Abi Layla, Ibn Shibrima, and Dawood ibn Abi Hind. These are scholars nearly equivalent to Abu Hanifa. He gave them positions. He said, you guys are the judges. And then he was known to be generous to the scholars. And it actually was said that most of his wealth went to the scholars. See, the masses of the ummah don't really rely on the word of the leaders. They have more faith and trust in the ulama. That's why the leaders always bring the ulama to justify their actions. So he sent to Abu Hanifa, he said, these are the judges and you're the head judge. You're the head judge. And here's the seal. He gave him a ring and here's the seal, take it. Abu Hanifa said, no, this is a Muslim leader. He may have had some oppression here and there. He may have oppressed his people, but he's Muslim. And no one of the Muslim leaders today, of the so-called Muslim leaders today, can be compared to this man. Ibn Hubayra said, Wallahi, if you don't take it, I'm going to lash you. The scholars surrounding here and this in the palace said, some of them just want to earn their living and kick back and relax, go back to their wives. Some of them want to do a seminar and go back to their children and mansions and chill out and enjoy life, earn a nice paycheck, get some bonuses from a little bit of seminars and talks and invitation they do. But then you got the righteous like Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, who teach, they're moved by matters of the ummah, they take the forefront responsibilities in matters of the ummah. Those are the righteous scholars. The other scholars tried to convince Abu Hanifa. They said, Abu Hanifa, take the position. He told you he's going to lash you. Don't subject yourself to harm. Don't kill yourself. Don't subject yourself to imprisonment. These are the other scholars trying to convince him, diffuse the situation. Abu Hanifa said, Wallahi, if he tells me go count the doors of the mosques in Wasil, I won't do it. If he tells me just merely go for me over there and count the doors of the mosque and tell me how many doors there, I won't do it. You want me to possibly behead someone unjustly and stamp on it? He didn't want to take a position with the rulers, which in itself possibly is nothing wrong with being a judge. But if Ibn Abu Hanifa rahimahullah feared he might oppress or wrong someone out of love for a leader, or maybe out of fear for that leader, and then he'd be held accountable by Allah for that. He basically wanted to stay away from the gates of the leader. Abu Hanifa felt he may be tempted by entering the gates of the rulers, that he may be fooled into something and misguided by them. So what should the ulama say with the rulers of today? He said, I won't even accept counting the doors of the masajid. You want me to accept the position of a judge? Yet look at the other scholars. Many were good, but they took positions. Abu Hanifa refused. Look who history documented. During their time, they were the ones looked up to. If they had Twitter or Facebook, they would be the most prominent. They were all over the media. They were all over in the scenes. They could go in any masjid and lecture. They were very well known to the masses. The ignorant people don't distinguish a lot of the times, because the rulers spend so much on advertising for these scholars and promoting their names, so they can affirm their own positions by having these scholars around them. Who knows the judge during Abu Hanifa's time, Abu Layla? Who knows him today? Out of any of you know? Ibn Shibrima, Dawood ibn Abi Hind. Any of you know him? Any of you know these names? Those were the prominent people during Abu Hanifa's time. who does not know Abu Hanifa today? Who does not know Abu Hanifa today? Now it's gotten to a point where in the West, it's not even in Muslim lands. Now they have the ulama who customize a new religion, a modernized religion, according to how, not Muslim, so-called Muslim leader, but according to how the kuffar want it, to please the kuffar. Listen to this hadith. Abu Dawood narrated in hadith sahih عن Abu Hurairah رضي الله عنه. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم: من تعلم علما مما يبتغى به وجه الله ولم يتعلمه إلا ليصيب به عرضا من الدنيا من عرض الدنيا لم يجد عرف الجنة يوم القيامة. Whoever learns a knowledge that should be only sought for the sake of Allah, he learns it for the sake of dunya, or this dunya, or other than the sake of Allah, he will not smell the fragrance of heaven. Arf al-Jannah means the fragrance of heaven. The fragrance of heaven is 40 years in one hadith, 70 years in one hadith, 100 years in another hadith. 3 authentic narration. Any other narration is not authentic. You do that, you learn a knowledge for other than this. This is a severe warning for anyone who learns any type of Islamic knowledge for any worldly gain. If this is just to earn a worldly gain, then how is it for those who learn this knowledge to serve the heads of kufr wherever they may be, or to promote kufr in the east and the west? It's a major sin for merely having the wrong intention on this knowledge. So imagine if you use it for other than that. Just the intention itself is a major sin if you don't do it for the sake of Allah. So imagine if you misguide people with it. Rarely anyone today knows those scholars who were popular during Abu Hanifa's time, who took the position. Even though many or most were not really deviants or hypocrites. Some clearly took the position to avoid the hardships or to avoid scrutiny of the leaders during their time. But they were really not hypocrites, many of them. No one knows them today. But who doesn't know Abu Hanifa today? Allah took the blessing out of their knowledge because of what they did. They might have had a temporary, imaginary blessing that some may have thought of it was a blessing, but it faded and then it was gone. Look at Abu Hanifa and look at his knowledge. Look at his legacy, look at his knowledge, look at his madhab, it lives on. The torture of Abu Hanifa began because he wouldn't accept the position. The one who was appointed to torture Abu Hanifa went to Ibn Hubayra. He said, the man's about to die. The one who's lashing him. He said, Ibn Hubayra, the man's going, Ibn Hubayra said, go tell him, fulfill my oath, and he walk out of prison. Oath, either take the position or you're going to be continued to lash. Abu Hanifa said, you go back and tell him, Wallah, if he wants me to count the masajid in Wasil or the masajid's gates, how many gates? I won't do that for him. You think I'm going to, this is with the lashing going on in prison. He had the key to the prison. After the whipper sympathized, imagine, the one who was whipping him sympathized with Abu Hanifa. Not the scholars, not the leaders. Abu Hanifa was told after mediation, they said, go think about it. They finally let him out of prison to think about it as a goodwill gesture, hoping that he'll change his mind. Ibn Hubayra, seen in a dream at that time as well, that the Prophet told him, you whip a man who did nothing wrong. So for both reasons, to think about it in the dream, they let Abu Hanifa go a grace period to see if they can win him over. Because they always dealt with love, fear, hope, fear with them. Abu Hanifa got on his camel and fled to Mecca. And remained in Mecca until the Umayyad rule changed to the Abbasi rule. Imagine that. If anyone was to tell a ruler, I don't want that position, what are they going to call him? What the Murji'a rejects going to call him today? They're going to call him Khawarij. This was leaders who were better than any of the leaders today, who never sold their dignity, never allied the enemy, who never honored and gave their resources and wealth to the enemy. Yet he refused to take a position with him. Ibn Hubayra, the governor of Baghdad, who did all this to Abu Hanifa, never made Baghdad a state for the enemy to roam around in it, for the enemies to roam around in it, making it more comfortable for them than their own homes. Yes, they had some oppression, yes, no doubt about that. But they were Muslim leaders. Today, you hear of a Murji'a reject saying, Maliki, who's the leader in Iraq today, the Shia, he's a wali amr, he must be obeyed. And anyone who revolts against him is a khawari. You heard that today. The punishment of Abu Hanifa was prison in lashings. And they took him, just the punishment of the lashing was 10 days. Every day he gets 10 lashes. Some said 11 days. So that's 110 lashes. The scholar said he was very steadfast and patient when he was lashed, except when he was lashed in the face, when they lashed him in the face. Why? Because he didn't want his mother in the future to see what happened to him in a visit, or probably if he gets released. When his mother seen it, she was extremely sad, and she told him, when he got out, she said, knowledge that leads you to this, you should leave it, son. She was sympathetic with him. And his response was stunning. He said, mother, if I wanted worldly gain, I would have gotten it and more. But I wanted Allah to know I guarded His religion and His knowledge. And I did not let these worldly matters destroy me. Physical torture is not destroying me, mom. That's basically what he's telling her. Using the knowledge in improper way is the destruction. 10 days, 10 years, who cares, mom? That's basically what he's telling her. I stood my ground, mom, for the sake of Allah. Why every day 10 lashes? Why every day 10 lashes? Why didn't they give him 110? Because they were so hard, they didn't want him to die, but rather suffer. His body couldn't handle more than 10 lashes. So they wanted him to suffer, so every day they give him 10 lashes, so they can torture him more. Abu Hanifa was adamant, I'm not going to be a judge. Ya Allah, all this, so he won't be a judge? A position, one of the highest positions of his time. When he was released, he said, كان غم أمي أشد علي من الضرب. My mom's agony over me was worse than the torture. She's depressed. She faces hardships knowing her son is in prison. That was the worst pain I suffered. So true. That statement is so true. There's no pain for one in prison who's a human being, true human being, worse than knowing the agony of the mother when she suffers. When I was taken to prison and my father, my mom gave an oath never to leave the house but to supplicate and make dua for us, or die in that status, which she, rahmatullah alayha, did. May Allah raise her ranks to the Firdaus. My family tells me she used to get up every single night, all night long, weep and cry and make dua. And I have no doubt, inshallah, that it was inshallah her dua that Allah accepted and I was released from. One of the matter pertaining to that issue that I remember when I mentioned Abu Hanifa's statement is, once I had not called for some time and not wrote or not had any communication. And I think they gave me 7 or 10 minutes, I can't remember. So when you call from prison, they give you the option of pressing a certain number, I can't remember, maybe 7 or something, to accept the call from prison. So before I said Assalamu alaikum, she used to know the recording and the number. So she pressed it. And by Allah, for 7 minutes, rahmatullah alayha, she would say, all I heard is Ahmad, Ahmad, Habibi Ahmad, Ahmad, Ahmad. For 10 straight minutes, I didn't know what was going on, how the house is, or she didn't know. She was overwhelmed in hearing my voice, that all she could say was Ahmad, and running around up and down the house telling the family, Ahmad, Ahmad's on the phone. That's why when someone's in prison, he can forgive. But there's others who have rights. If you contributed with words, there's others who have rights who may have made dua on you in the nights. Because it's not only the right of the one in prison. There's a mother, there's a son, there's wife, there's husband, who are all involved. And what can you do? What do you think they do in the midst of agony like this other than make dua against one who was responsible for the imprisonment? Abu Hanifa gets slashed. Abu Hanifa gets imprisoned. This is the path of the righteous. Ali ibn Asim said, لو وزن علم إمام أبي حنيفة بعلم أهل زمانه رجح عليهم. If you were to take the knowledge of Abu Hanifa and the knowledge of the people during his time, all of them, which were big scholars, and among the people of the time was Imam Malik. If you take them, Imam Abu Hanifa's knowledge would outweigh them. Ibn al-Mubarak said Malik, they told him, Malik is more knowledgeable or someone else. He said, they asked him between Malik and Abu Hanifa and others. He said, Abu Hanifa afqah al-nas. Most knowledgeable is Abu Hanifa. Abu Muawiyah al-Dari said, Hubbu Abi Hanifa min as-Sunnah. Loving Abu Hanifa is from the Sunnah. This is a man, what I'm telling you is who he was, is a man who went in and out of prison. This is the man who stood against the Abbasiyya and Umayyah. Al-Dhahabi said, leadership in fiqh and the details of fiqh are to Abu Hanifa. I mean, he is the imam in that matter. The torment was so severe to Abu Hanifa that when Imam Ahmad used to remember it, he would weep and cry and make dua for Abu Hanifa. No, if you read the books of fiqh and you know about fiqh, you will know among the four madhahib, if you were to say what are the two who had the most disputes, it would be between Abu Hanifa the first and Ahmad, who was the last of the four. Because Abu Hanifa had very little hadith and he had to do a lot of ijtihad rahimahullah, whereas Ahmad had plenty of hadith compiled and he resorted more to hadith. Did Imam Ahmad say, I'm glad Abu Hanifa, who I disputed with him in this and this and this, I'm glad he got tortured in prison? He used to remember the lashing of his brother Abu Hanifa, who differed in many fiqh issues, and cry and make dua for him. And he used to remember when he himself was being lashed and make dua for Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa remained a fugitive until the leadership changed. Now the Umayyah took rule. Abu Ja'far al-Mansur takes leadership. So Abu Ja'far is a great leader, a man, big leader. Who was he? He was a man who wore harsh clothing. His dresses were all stitched up. He is not a man who had a yacht for $20 billion. He was known not to have any music or instruments of music or anything of that sort in his palaces or houses. He abolished all that. When he knew a drum was played, he ordered in his palace by the servants, he ordered it be destroyed. He would never spend extravagantly on himself or even on poets like others would do. He would give them just a regular salary. This man, even though he had oppression, no question about his leadership had oppression, his foot is worth more than all the leaders of the Muslim countries today, combined. The Majus invaded during his time. They invaded Nisabur and Qawmas and Rai, which are towns north of Iran today. They invaded the Majus, the fire worshippers. They took some Muslim wealth, they killed some Muslim man, and they took women and kids as prisoners. Read in the history. This was Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. So he sent Al-Ijli, who was a general, and he said, you don't come back here until you regain the Muslim wealth and you free every last woman and child they took as prisoners. And he did so. Yeah, he oppressed his own people. Yes, he did wrong in his town. But when an outsider, Majusi, came to invade the northern part of Iran where Muslims were, he put a stop to it immediately. Compare that with the leaders today who imprison the women and hand them over to the enemies of Allah. You see why I say Abu Ja'far's foot is better than the leaders of today? And Al-Bazazi said, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur made people give an oath that if you rebel against me, your blood is in vain, meaning I can take your blood. So the people of Mosul in Iraq rebelled against him, renegated against Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. He gathered them, he had the power, he gathered them, he imprisoned them. And so he said to the scholars, all the scholars were there, including Abu Hanifa, he said, the mu'min follow their rules. The Prophet ﷺ said, al-mu'minun ala shurutihim. I said, if you rebel against me, your blood is gone. So the Kisab scholars said, yeah, you're making a point. You took an oath, they violated it, you kill them all. Abu Hanifa remained silent. So Abu Ja'far al-Mansur said, what do you have to say, Abu Hanifa? Abu Hanifa said, they gave an oath on a matter which is not under their control to give an oath on. They can't even give a promise like that. And you impose the rule on them, you're not supposed to. The blood of a Muslim is not permissible. The blood is not permissible to be shed except in three. And none of the three, they did. So the rule of Allah supersedes your oath and your rule that you guys exchanged. What Abu Hanifa meant was the hadith that the Prophet ﷺ said, the blood of a Muslim cannot be shed except if he kills or if he commits adultery or if he leaves his religion. Islam, this is in Islamic Khilafah. Islam sacreds the blood, so you can't kill him. So Abu Ja'far accepted Abu Hanifa's statement and he let him go. It took a lot, but he let him go. He told Abu Hanifa, I let him go. Don't inspire people to rebel against me. And he let Abu Hanifa go. Abu Hanifa remained steadfast, firm, outspoken in matters of truth. Even though the leader was kissing up to him. The others kissed up to the leader kissed up to him. Zafar said, his student, Abu Hanifa's student, he said, Abu Hanifa used to continue to speak loud and be in the forefront of matters of the ummah. Until I told him, Abu Hanifa, when you're going to be quiet, they're going to put the noose around our necks if you don't stop. The same exact problem that happened during the Umayyad rule happened when Abu Ja'far took leadership. After he quashed the revolt, he summoned Abu Hanifa. And just like Ibn Hubayra did back in the previous ruling, he said, Abu Hanifa, you should become a judge. And you're going to be the head judge. And he sent 10,000 dirham and a female servant. And Abu Hanifa, Abdullah ibn Humayd, who brought he was a minister for Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, he brought it. He said, take this back to him. I don't accept this. He said, take it. He said, I refuse it. So he was summoned to the palace, Abu Hanifa. And when he was summoned, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur said, are you rejecting the position of a judge? He said, yes, I reject it. I'm not fit for that position. And they kept going on and on, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur and Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah. So Abu Ja'far gets mad because he speaks back to him. Abu Hanifa said, I'm not fit for it. So Abu Ja'far said, you're a liar. Abu Hanifa said, well, now you called me a liar. How can a liar become a judge? Abu Ja'far gets even angrier and said, Wallahi, you're going to be a judge or I'm going to lash you with just same thing Ibn Hubayra did a while ago. Abu Hanifa said, Wallahi, I'm not going to be a judge. So one of the guards there said, our leader says an oath and you say an oath? Abu Hanifa said, yeah, well, he's richer than me. He can do a kafara. I can't. Meaning he's richer. He can feed 10 poor people. He can do a kafara. I'm a poor man. He was sort of mocking, making fun of them. Then he was ordered in prison. Do you know when Abu Hanifa, after this dialogue went on, what Abu Hanifa was in prison for? He was in prison because he was considered a Khariji. He was in and out. These are the path of the righteous. In and out of prison while the others are in and out of 5- and 7-star hotels. This was a man who was in prison because he's considered a Khariji. They considered him a Khariji. Not only did they consider Abu Hanifa a Khariji, this was his official charge. He was considered Alawi Khariji. Imagine that. You know the ancestors of Hafiz and Bashar al-Assad? They were always trying to revolt against and renegade against Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. They considered Abu Hanifa part of that. Alawi Khariji. So Abu Ja'far al-Mansur orders him in prison. So basically what I'm trying to say, don't get mad when a Murji'a reject calls you a Khariji. And it's not only today, it's not only the Murji'a rejects who call a Khariji, but I heard a modernist very recent in a clip, a modernist in the West, use the word Khariji in defaming one of the biggest leaders of our time. Now the modernists, so-called Salafis, and the Murji'a rejects began using the word Khariji. Abu Ja'far lets him go to prison and orders that he be tortured under his command, and he says treat him very harshly and threaten his life and pressure him in every single way you can. Abu Hanifa right now at this time, at this era, Abu Ja'far Mansur was right approximately 70 years old. He was weak, he was old, and they feared that he may die in prison. And this might cause an uprising. So they let him go to his house, but in his house he's under house arrest. He can't speak, he can't leave, not even for salah. He can't give no fatwas, yet Abu Hanifa remained firm. And he died in his prison 150 years after the hijrah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He died in his house prison, and it said that Abu Ja'far al-Mansur slipped poison to his house and killed him. It said that he slipped it within the food, and it said that he forced Abu Hanifa, sent someone to force Abu Hanifa to eat that prison. When he died, Abu Hanifa, he said, don't bury me on a land that the leaders took unjustly or by force from anyone. That was among the last things Abu Hanifa said. The righteous ulama always struggled with their rulers. They struggled with them. They weren't blind, submissive followers, subservient to their leaders, even though they are uncomparable to the leaders of today. I'm going to repeat, they were oppressive back then, but they're uncomparable to the leaders of today. What amazes one in all these trials of Abu Hanifa, for example, he had the keys to the prison. He could have left anytime he wanted. What are the keys to the prison? What is the keys to his freedom? What does he got to do? All he's got to do, accept, in both times, accept the position, the highest prestigious position a alim of his time could dream of. But he said, رَبِّ السِّجْنُ وَحَبُّ إِلَيْهِ. The lashing, the torture, the prison, the humiliation were more beloved to Abu Hanifa than what? What did he have to do? Than a prestigious job any alim or imam of his time would have dreamed of. Not once, but twice. During the Umayyah Khilafah and during the Abbasiyya Khilafah. You see the difference between the ulama al-Rabbaniyin and ulama al-Dunya, al-Salatin. Who was these leaders Abu Hanifa refused to be a follower of? Who were they? Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, Ibn Hubayra. Ibn Hubayra did mistakes. He oppressed. But he was a man who used to call scholars every time he felt his heart was hardened. He would call the scholars to his palace and tell them, advise me. Al-Hasan al-Basri used to walk in his palace and be very harsh advising him. And he would weep. Al-Sha'bi said, when we used to walk in, me and Al-Hasan al-Basri used to scare him, to scare the leader and scold him and warn him in matters and verses and a hadith of the life after. So much that Ibn Hubayra, the leader, would weep and cry so much we think he's going to die from the crying. He cried so much from fear of Allah that we think he's going to. This was a leader not spreading the call of kufr out of Mecca, spreading the call of interfaith out of Mecca. Tell the stance that I'm telling you, both of them, in the Umayyah and the Abbasi Khilafah of Abu Hanifa. Take the name Abu Hanifa out, take the Umayyah Khilafah out, and take the Abbasiyya Khalifa out. Take the stance and say it to anyone. You know what they're going to do to those Murji'a rejects? Tell them the stance of Abu Hanifa without mentioning the names of the leaders or the Imam. They're going to say he's a Khariji, and they're going to send you, they're going to tell you, send one of their 12-year-old to write you a 20-page refutation, and then they're going to say, then you tell them, but this was Abu Hanifa. They're going to back away, say, oh, but Barbahari said don't refute, don't debate with Mubtadi'a and you're a Mubtadi'a. This is their path. This is how they become misguided. I heard a snippet that I talked about a moment. A da'iyah in the US lying about a big scholar, a big person, and saying Ibn Uthaymeen considered this man a Khariji. And Salman al-Auda considered this man a Khariji. You modernists are talking and using Ibn Uthaymeen. Before you quote Ibn Uthaymeen and calling someone a Khariji, which is not really true, this is a lie, he's a liar. Before you quote that, why don't you use Ibn Uthaymeen's works and quote him on Wala and Bara, which concerns you in your Aqeedah and your heaven and hell directly. I remember once I was involved in a dispute of a husband and a wife. Wallahi al-Azim. The husband was next to me and the wife was behind the curtains in the dining room. They had a dispute. They were solving a marital problem. We were solving some kind of marital problem that would have approximately 12 years ago. And the topic came up that wasn't really essential to the main topic of the feud. She said, Shaykh, I know my rights over this man, that I have to be obedient. And one of the things she mentioned, I don't know what was the content, she said, Shaykh, I know anal sex is haram, but if he orders me to do anal sex, which he does, then I give in because I'm supposed to listen to my husband. I know it's haram to sit with mingled men and females and talk with them, but if he asks me, I do it because I'm supposed to be obedient. Like the Prophet ﷺ said, MashaAllah, the new fiqh, she's a faqihah now. The order of the husband supersedes the order of Allah. She heard so much hadith, this innocent woman, in obedience to the husband. Her fiqh made her assume that the obedience to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the obedience to the Prophet Muhammad, the obedience to the husband supersedes the obedience to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Allah. I looked at the faqih, I said, MashaAllah, MashaAllah, no fiqh. The order of the husband supersedes the order of Allah. She heard so much hadith and obedience of the husband, her fiqh made her assume it supersedes any other order. You can't blame an ignorant woman born in this country who can't really speak a lot of Arabic for that rationale. She was corrected and she accepted. May Allah grant her and her husband barakah, inshallah ta'ala. But that rationale, the point of it is that rationale is that of the Murji'ah today. And all the ulama of the Salatin and the modernists along with them. That's the same rationale they adopt. That's exactly how those so-called ulama view things. Every time you hear them submission to the leaders, every time you hear them obedient, you remember this woman's rationale. It's the same thing, except she's an ignorant woman, they're knowledgeable, they know what they're doing. Take for example, let me give you a practical. A'id al-Qarni. A'id al-Qarni, he interrogated 3 of the ulama after their torture, inside prison. He went inside prison, he went into the prison after their torture, after their beating, after their threats, and did an interview with them that they allegedly recanted everything they had ever said. He went after that on Al Jazeera, about a few months after that. In the interview, the reporter asked him, near clean-shaven man, asked him, how could you accept something like that? You know what his response was? Like that woman. Wali al-Amr told me to do that. Just like that woman, the one that said, I know sex is permissible, because same A'id al-Qarni's rationale. The rationale of that woman is the same thing as that scholar. Her husband ordered her to do haram, she must be obedient to him because he's her husband. The king ordered him to go in prison and interrogate those people after their torture. He is part of it. He said, I have to listen. You be a participant in the torture of your brother because the leader said it. What's the difference between you and that woman who said, I know sex is permissible? But Abu Hanifa, no. If he asked me to count the doors and the gates of Mosul's masjids, I won't do it. I won't even do something I think is okay to do for him, let alone something else. Is he a Khariji? Ask him if he's a Khariji. Another example of one who's always apparent on TVs all over and who supposedly his tears don't dry because of verses, he's moved by verses from the Quran. This week he goes to Vienna, Austria, as one of the heads of the delegation to promote interfaith. What happened to all those tears that were shed? If those tears don't move you to the right aqidah, there's no good in those tears. Why does he go? His rationale is the same as that woman who said it's okay to have anal sex because her husband ordered. The leader, Wali al-Amr, said to go to Vienna and promote interfaith. Wali al-Amr said that. Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, and al-Lajna, just many years ago, gave a fatwa that interfaith is a call of kufr. How so suddenly did it become a call of Islam and to promote Islam? Why at one point the call of kufr now has become the ideal method to spread Islam? What has changed? Explain to me how the scholars of Saudi in their fatwa 17300, you can go look it up, Ibn Baz, Bakr Abu Zayd, Shaykh, Fawzan, and signed it. Back in the days, they said in a long fatwa, I just want you to look at point number 8 in it. They said if a Muslim calls to this call, it's a call of ridda, apostate. It may make him apostate. This is the own high official scholars over there. Why and what changed? Some play games with the terminology, dialogue, da'wah. There's a difference between da'wah, which we're all for, and there's a difference between interfaith. Al-Fawzan, Al-Rajhi, Al-Ghunayman, Al-Salih, Al-Mahmud, Al-Barrak, all of them issued fatwas, consider a call of kufr. They're scholars over there. Righteous, inshallah, guided scholars. When Al-Barrak was going to be put on trial for calling a call of kufr, over 20 big, reputable scholars backed him with a fatwa saying what he said is the Quran and the Sunnah. This individual who represents this delegation of interfaith was asked by a caller one time, about a year ago. He was asked, why don't you talk about the leader, King Abdullah, and what he does? And the one in live question said, one of the things is interfaith. So this man, this sheikh, responds, because today, you might not know it, they're using Mecca, instead of spreading Islam out of Mecca, it's become a headquarters to spread an interfaith. So this sheikh Instead of admitting his guilt or brushing it away or something, he says, no, the Christians in Najran came to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mosque in Medina, and they were going to pray to the west, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, let them pray. They prayed their own prayer in the west in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's mosque. This is narrated Ibn Kathir and Ibn Ishaq. This was over a year ago. And it's possible that his justification was why they chose him today to go to Austria and be one of the leaders of that. Little did anyone comment on that story by Ibn Ishaq and Ibn Kathir, that its isnad is mu'dal. Meaning, isnad mu'dal means there's two narrators right after each other missing. Muhammad ibn Ja'far ibn Zubayr narrates from the Tabi'een. There's two men right after each other missing. So what, we cannot take a hadith like that on any issue. A mu'dal is like a munqati'. It's the same thing. Mu'dal is when two men in the narration are missing right after each other. Mursal is when there's one missing or two missing, and when it's missing throughout the isnad. So it could be one missing from here, one missing here. Mu'dal is when they're missing right after each other. Al-Dhahabi said about al-mu'dal, it's hadith, it's rare that anyone uses these type of hadith. No one uses these type of hadith. But to promote the call of kufr, now so suddenly we use it. Because the leader wants it. Just like that woman, except more advanced than that woman, their rationale. Where is the rest of the ulama to show this hadith was mu'dal? If it was on any other topic, say, oh, this man is mentioned in weak hadith, in fabricated hadith that you can't even attribute to the Prophet ﷺ. Think, ya Muslimin, think who are the righteous leaders and are not. Distinguish between those who are the slaves of the rulers and slaves of the Rahman. Distinguish between those who are the slaves of popularity and those who seek to please with Allah. Take your religion, your most valued thing, out from those who fear Allah. Distinguish between the sellouts who want to gain more followers and then those who want to follow Allah. This was the path of the righteous. Abu Hanifa rahimahullah dies in prison. Some pass the test in prison. Some don't pass the test in prison, but the righteous always remain steadfast. When the mediators went to Abu Hanifa to try to mediate, as the whips and lashes were going on, he said, a whip in this life is easier for me to deal with than the hooked rods of iron in hellfire. Wallahi, I won't take that position even if he kills me. وَلَهُمْ مَقَامِعُ مِنْ حَدِيدٍ. He said in Surah Al-Hajj in verse 21, ضربة لي في الدنيا أخف من معالجة مقامع الحديد في الآخرة والله لا أفعل وإن قتلني. He fled to Mecca and he did not return until it was changed, leadership was changed to Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. And when Abu Ja'far al-Mansur took leadership, he imprisoned him and he remained steadfast. Because leaders don't leave people who are of knowledge speak their knowledge unless the knowledge goes in the benefit of their remaining firm in their thrones and seats. And this was the righteous Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Now we'll talk about Imam Malik rahimahullah.